Our election 2016 coverage continues on this special edition of Newsmakers. I'm Fred Martino. Thanks for joining us. Today we focus on New Mexico House District 53, a program note you'll find an interview with the Democrat in the race, Willie Madrid, on the Newsmakers page at KRWG.org. Today we're pleased to welcome Republican Representative Rick Little. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Fred. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you with us today. You know, all of our questions were submitted by the public. Our regular viewers are familiar with them because we've asked them of almost all of the candidates, because most of the candidates came in for either forums or interviews. And we're going to begin with some pretty controversial questions. The first one is, do you support physician assistance in dying? Yes or no, and why?
I would say on that, as of this time, no. And my reason behind that, I would just venture to say, I am a Christian. I believe in biblical values, and I believe there's more than to life than just life. And I believe God has a large part in that, and I feel like it's really not up to us to make those decisions.
Okay. What do you say to those who argue, well, this is it's a personal medical decision, and actually sometimes not a matter of chance, if you will, in terms of living and dying, because folks are kept alive by machines?
Well, in the case of machines, that's a whole nother story. If machines are keeping you alive, then in essence, I would say that, you know, if you're going to pull the plug, that's not necessarily, none of us is going to live forever. And so in this world, in this physical world anyway, but I believe that it's a good idea to, you know, and it's a family and a doctor decision. Once a person has ceased to live in essence on their own, then I think that'd be perfectly fine.
Okay. Another controversial question, this is one that's already come before some committees in the legislature. Do you support allowing voters to decide on the legal sale of recreational marijuana in New Mexico? Yes or no, and why?
Yes, I think absolutely so. We are a democratic republic, and I believe that the public has a right. There are some advantages, there are disadvantages, and we'll have to deal with those depending on how they vote. I think their vote should be very important, and I hope every vote counts.
You've been in the legislature, so you have a knowledge of attitudes on this. You know other legislators, you've worked with them. Do you think there's a chance in the next few years that we may get the chance to vote on this, that the public may get a chance to have their say?
And that would be perfectly fine. One of the issues that we do have, though, is the issue with the federal government laws and coming in differently. But Colorado has done it, and I believe in sovereignty of state rights. So I believe as a state, if we wanted to do it, we could do the same thing that they do. One of the problems we do have in New Mexico is the fact that we are a welfare state, and so when the federal government says jump, we jump, because for every $1 we send back to them, we get back too. But it's generating a lot of money over there. I do believe, though, personally, I believe it's still a gateway drug. I'm not ready until I know Colorado's had some issues, and I'd like to see some of those issues worked out. It seems that crime has gone up. And I believe it is a gateway drug. One of the things we're doing in economic and rural development is we're working on hemp, which is a whole different thing. There are some medical value that comes from it, but I think it'd be a great industry to bring here, and that's still, as far as the government, federal government is concerned, it's only, right now you can just do experimental in what that can do, but I believe...
Well, of course, there was a hemp bill that passed, but it was vetoed.
Yes, sir.
So that raises another question, but let's start first with the first one. Do you think there's a chance this will get before voters? Will legislators put it before voters?
I will tell you, it was going to get to the legislature.
Okay, so it will be a bill. Topic again. Yeah.
Yes, I will tell you, it will be a topic, and with some of our representatives and senators especially. This is a way to help our budget.
Okay.
It will bring in like
and
for
we
Colorado,
need money. Let's just be clear, right?
No doubt about it. We just finished a session where we had to cut programs and cut every department and trade money here and there. We took off capital outlay, which would have been some jobs, you know, here and there. But yes, you know, I believe it's going to be on there, and I think the money issue is going to be one of the major issues.
One of the discussions,
yes,
absolutely. Now let's move to the hemp thing because you brought it up. Will that come back as well? Because this is very important to farmers. The agriculture industry says, no, this is a new one, and it's, for that matter, it's not a high water use crop either. So,
and that's the main point. It's not a high water crop. It was passed through the legislature already once. And the products that they're using off of hemp now, and the things that are in manufacturing, whatever. And my thought is too, not only do we do it for the farmers because it doesn't take as much water, but we should be able to start, if we can grow enough of it, we start the manufacturing here. And then there's a medical chemical that comes out of it also that is very beneficial, but we're just not able to do it. And part of it is, and I think part of the reason for the veto was because of the difference with the federal government and the laws.
Okay, interesting. The next question, and this gets to this topic that you brought up in relation to marijuana, our economy. We have two questions on the economy. The first one, how would you provide incentives for businesses to relocate to our state, if any?
Well, I'll tell you, I am on the interim committee chairman for economic and rural development right now. And what we are doing as far as our economic development department, we are giving incentives already. We're giving tax incentives. As a matter of fact, we have a film industry that we're giving, and that's not even a tax incentive, that is a rebate of 25% on what they spend. We have the,
it's $50 million a year, right?
Up to $50 million a year,
right.
and a lot of people think that should have been on the chopping block when we were cutting budgets for departments and especially into our schools.
Yeah.
So, you know, I would say that it's, you know, we've got to do some things in economic development to help bring. Oh, JTIP, that's another one. That's what I was just thinking of. JTIP, we're helping with job placement and even paying for jobs here. We've got all kinds of different initiatives going on, and I think we're doing as much as we can. I will say that our tourism department is bringing in a lot of tourism, which is helping the economy. There's things we're doing, but part of the problem is we're so dependent on oil and gas in our revenue for our budget that it just makes it tough when that goes down.
Well, you mentioned a number of the incentives, and it makes me think of an article that I read the other day in the Albuquerque Journal, where a columnist was writing about the most high-profile one, the LEDA fund, money that is used to draw in companies from elsewhere. And the biggest award, I believe, from that fund that happened very recently, it was $10 million for Facebook.
Yeah.
And this columnist said, look, this is maybe 50 jobs. I have deep questions about this. This is just the beginning, the 10 million, that there's also additional money, training money that you mentioned, JTIP, that might come in, and it may be 50 jobs. What do you think? I mean, when you see that?
My look at it is, I really believe that the government shouldn't be picking winners and losers. And in this particular case, I think we're doing exactly that. And maybe, I think we're in a time where, especially when we're losing population here and we don't have jobs for especially those coming out of our colleges and universities to put them into, and maybe we're going overboard because
so it's the marquee value. You see,
that's right.
Facebook, and you know, and the all of a sudden the coffers open. And that's the argument that was made.
And the thing that I would like to see us do, rather than doing the incentive part of it, is if we would work with our tax structure and work with our regulations in this state and get them to where they were competitive, more competitive with other states. We've done a lot. I will say we have done a lot. But if we can get them down to where they're lower or better than other states, I think we would attract that business anyway, and without having to do the incentives, and especially some businesses over others. I'm just not real strong on that, but right now it's the system we have, especially with our gross receipts tax. It's just a way of trying to attract business here. Okay. Another thing that would be right to work, there's all kinds of issues that would help us attract more business, and without doing it by giving away tax dollars to supplement business.
Okay. Well, that question was specifically about incentives. Another question submitted by the public was very general. What should the state legislature do to improve the economy in New Mexico? Are there other things that you haven't already mentioned that you think need to be done?
You know, looking at other states and looking at the state of New Mexico, we're about at max. I'm not sure what we can do. We even do things like we put in the rail runner for one thing, and we've got the spaceport here. We've spent a lot of money on these different initiatives, and the return just hasn't been there.
As you know, a lot of people argue that those weren't the right investments, so that in other words, quality of life issues should have been where the money went, whether that's parks, whether that's schools, whether that's infrastructure, roads, bridges, neighborhoods, money for neighborhood development. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm from rural New Mexico.
Yeah.
My area is not closer to big cities and whatnot. And I will tell you, in our particular areas, we don't need quality of life issues as much as we need sewer and roads. We just have to have the natural gas would be great in some of our places. Not where I'm at, but broadband. I mean, that would help. That would help business, and that would be something that I think maybe we should look at as government. But there's just so many things. It's hard to put it into perspective. But in rural America, I will say I don't like the way capital outlay is done. And for the main thing, when you got places like Albuquerque, where maybe a senator or a representative has just a small part of town, those are the things that they look at: quality of life. And I'll just say what I say out there to the public is, I don't need doggy poo-poo bags in my park. I don't need AstroTurf on the Little League field over here in this area, because the city's taking care of most things. The lighting's there. Most everything's taken care of. We need to run capital outlay different, so infrastructure in the state gets put first rather than some of these smaller issues. I don't like the way we give it out to senators and representatives to just use as a bring home the bacon idea.
Next question, do you support universal preschool education? If so, how would you bring it about?
In this particular case, and maybe I'm old school, and I understand the science behind, kids learn earlier at an earlier age, but then I'm more about the family and about community, and I believe part of the thing that we're missing right now is our families. And when you're shipping your kids off at 2 and 3 years old, to go to a class, to me, I believe that that's a parent's responsibility, and I know it's tough, single parent homes, the amount we have right now, and all of those kind of issues, but I believe the child is better brought up, better, more stable, and can learn about the same amount as they learn in these preschools. I will tell you that my grandkids, my kids especially, but my grandkids, when they went to kindergarten, it was almost a little bit boring for them, because at home we read to them just about every night. They learned their ABCs, they learned their numbers, they learned just about everything they learned in kindergarten to begin with. Now we can do these things in a classroom, in Head Start, and let me just start with Head Start. It's a good program in one sense, but then on the other hand, I haven't seen any statistics, and they haven't shown me any statistics that more of those kids graduate high school or go to college. And if they're not, I don't think that's the better place for them to be.
Okay. Our next question, this is an environmental one, but also an economic one. How would you allocate increasingly scarce water resources?
That's an issue we've been wrestling with for a long time. We're in a large drought season. It's been 10 years or something now. I can't. When I was a kid, the Rio Grande never was dry. Yeah, even down this far. And it's an issue that we're looking at, and I think right now it's in the court systems. We got Water and Natural Resources Committee is looking at all the issues. I don't have an answer on what exactly that is, but I know it's one of the highest priorities of our state right now, and it should be. And we're trying to work out how to make it equitable for not only our farmers but for our municipalities, and trying to make that work out. And then at this particular time, we're even dealing with Texas as far as lawsuits and making sure our New Mexico water gets down to all the way down to Rio Grande into the Texas. So these are issues, and I will tell you they're being worked on. We're doing what we can, and the university here is working on all kinds of water resource areas for conservation and different things, and I think we're doing about as much as we can, but we've got to figure it out for sure.
Okay.
Water's the most precious natural resource in the desert for sure.
Okay. Next question, should the state promote renewable energy? If so, how?
You know, we already are promoting renewable energy, and
well, of course, the solar tax credit, though, was allowed to expire, so that for residential solar power. But how are we? You say we're doing it now. How do we? How is it that we're doing it now?
As a state, we've already mandated that our electric grid has to be 20% by 20. I mean, which means we are forcing it upon our electric companies to have some type of renewable energies. Now,
standards, sure.
When I'm looking at renewable energy, so we've got that, and then there's still federal subsidies that come in, and there must be still some state subsidies because people are still putting them on. I am more focused on reliable energy myself, and I believe natural gas and unfortunately our coal up in the Four Corners area is a big problem to me, because the federal government, the EPA, is pretty much putting not only the Indians provide the coal, and then it was jobs and it was reliable energy, and with the scrubbers and the cleaners they have now to the environment, I don't believe that it was doing enough to the environment to close it down. Those are more reliable sources of energy. Oil and gas and coal has been good for us for hundreds of years. And I believe, as far as the solar industry, should we here at the university, they're doing studies, and when this solar technology catches up to where it can be just as cheap as natural gas, I'm going to be all for it. But it's not a reliable source. The wind, it's got to be blowing when it's happening, and you've got to have the sun out, which means it's not a reliable source of energy. And really, in essence, it costs more than our natural gas energy that we're getting right now.
Okay. How would you improve access to health care, especially mental health care in the state?
I think we're making strides on that, especially when it comes to our court system and our criminal justice system. We are working on mental health issues, because for one thing, when those patients are in the jails, they're just costing money, and it's really just a place for them to go. We're looking at clinics before where police officers can maybe take them to a clinic first if they think there's an issue before they're put into incarcerated, and I think in our healthcare system now, mental health is a higher priority than it has been. So I think we're working towards that. What more we need to do? None of us in the legislature. We have one doctor, so
Terry McMillan, right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And I will tell you, we rely on him a lot on a lot of the things that we do in the legislature, because he is a doctor and he knows where that side of the fence is for the decisions that we have to make. So I will say I think we're working towards those ends, and mental health is one of our higher issues also.
Another question about healthcare: what are your expectations for Medicaid funding in New Mexico?
It costs more money.
Absolutely, yeah.
Just a few years ago, we took on more from the federal government than I think we should have. I think they paid it was 3 years out. They were going to pay full cost, and then we were sort of taking over some. And we're dealing with
eventually
that. We're dealing with that in our legislature now, because we're already incurring some of those costs, and we put a lot more people on the rolls. And one of the ways we're dealing with that is we're looking at a cost of co-pays and different things, your doctor's visit, where it wouldn't have to be much, but something that helps substantiate that, and maybe for unnecessary doctor visits, maybe it'll make you think a little bit if you've got to put a little bit of skin in the game before you go. So I'm not how we're going to pay for it is the question. So
okay. Another question that deals with money: are you in favor of a professional legislature with legislators being paid a salary? Yes or no, and why?
I'm up in the air on that a little bit. I think you might have a better type of legislator if you were able to pay. But I will say, for my particular instance, I didn't get in this for the pay. Obviously, I'm in now. But if you could spend more time instead of just being a part-time legislator, I think it would help. But then on the other hand, I tell a lot of people, you know, most of the time the citizens are better off when we're not in the legislature, but that's because some of the things that go on there. But I think that, you know, there's pros and cons to that. Me right now, I'm on the fence. I'm not pushing for trying to get paid. I'm doing this because I want to serve New Mexico. I want to make it a better place, especially for my family, especially my grandkids. I've got 7 kids and 15 grandkids so far, and still having more. So I want to make sure that we're doing things in New Mexico that's going to have a bright future for our children.
Okay. Well, speaking of children, how would you improve our secondary school system?
Improve our secondary school system. I think we have quite a system going on in the state of New Mexico as it is. For the population we have within a local distance of our constituents, I think we've got something like 7 or 8 4-year colleges in the state of New Mexico. You know, Arizona only has 3, and they've got over 3 times the population that we have. Our community colleges, I think, are good. I'm not sure. I think we need to really look at, instead of putting our money into infrastructure and buildings and maintenance and staff and those kind of things in these outer places, maybe we should make it a little maybe easier for our kids to be able to get in, to go to our 4-year colleges or even our community college, but have them. It would be more cost effective if we could have them, I think, closer to the main campuses, and if we did that, I think there would be more money to be used for kids' education rather than using it for infrastructure.
Okay. Our next question you've already hinted at when we were talking about economic development. Do you support right-to-work laws, yes or no, and why? And for our viewers' benefit, to explain this for folks who are not real familiar with the right-to-work laws, and this is something that has been before the legislature and has been promoted by the governor and some legislators. This allows folks who work at a place where there's a union to be able to benefit from the collective bargaining that takes place that the union does and refuse to pay into the union dues. It will allow that if it's passed. And so if you can expand on why you support it.
Okay, the way, I don't believe anybody should be denied a job because they're not paying union support. I believe we have the freedom, and we should have the freedom to be able to. Now, on the other side of that coin, you know, they are trying to do some things for better wages and benefits and those to try to help the worker, and I understand those issues. But, and if they want to do that, and I think a lot of our unions are doing great work. They've got great apprenticeship programs. They've got a lot of good things going on. But to make it mandatory for me to be able to work is something that it just runs against my grain, because
so it's really a
freedom.
Philosophical issue for
That's
you, really.
For me,
Okay.
It is. And on that same respect, where do our union wages are quite a bit higher, and we run our Bacon Act runs on union wages, and I believe that those wages should be an average of what New Mexico is, including those union wages. And if we average that down, most of the jobs that right to work would even be looked at as far as for contracts is with government roads, government schools, government whatever we're building. And so if we took that money and those wages were down a little, then I believe that there'd be more money for the infrastructure things, more money for our schools, more money for our roads, more money instead of going out in wages. I think it's taxpayer money, and I think it would help all the way around.
Okay. Another money question. Would you be in favor of public financing for all state elections, yes or no, and why?
It would probably save me some money, but no. You know, I believe there's probably pros and cons to both of this. I think that the way it is now, it looks like there's certain monies funneled in, but when you look at our national election, we've got money flowing from high dollars on both sides, and you know, usually it's one side of the aisle saying, well, they're doing it, and the other side is they're doing it. If it were public dollars, and we already have that in our PRC. They get $90,000 per each one now, and I believe they can put in their own monies and do whatever they want to do. But if we did that, then it would be here again. Now the taxpayers are paying for it. And then maybe one of the other the devil being in the plan, or how you're going to make that, the details is it could be convoluted. If it was worked out, I think, and we could afford it. Right now, we're not able to afford a whole lot of anything. But
yeah.
and when you think there's 72, there's 112 of us, it makes for, you know, it'd be a little bit of a high dollar thing. But then there wouldn't be the per diem. I'm not sure how the per diem works out that way either. And maybe it would be better to, instead of look at the per diem amounts and look at what it would cost. I don't know.
Well, when I asked you that question, you said it might save you some money. So that implies you do some self-funding of your campaign?
Well, I think most candidates do.
Most candidates do.
And you know, I've gone from a campaign that the very first year we spent maybe, I don't know, $16,000. And the very next year, I think I spent $40,000.
Wow!
And not myself. This is donations and everything. But and now we're up to a point to where the contested races, the ones in swing district areas, are running $100,000, and that's just a lot of money, it would seem. Now,
does that bother you?
Part of that, it does some. But then on the other hand, the money is going into advertising and, you know, radio, and I mean all these other. It does help the economy in one respect, but then it just, Then I'm not the type of a legislator where if somebody gives me some money, you know, up front that, you know, you can come to me with whatever you want. But when it comes down, I'm going to do things. I believe in free market enterprise. I believe in freedom. I believe in, you know, our liberty. I believe in smaller government. If you line up with me, well, fine. If you don't give. I mean, I don't care.
I see. I understand.
It has to do with I'm trying to do the right thing up there, and so, you know, those type of money. But to run these kind of campaigns now, you got to have some input, or it's more money than I would be able to afford to be able to run.
I understand.
Yeah.
Rick Little. Rick, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. We're glad to be here, Fred.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us at home. That is our time for now. Join us on KRWG Radio every weekday. It's morning edition from 5 to 9, Fresh Air at 11, followed by Here and Now, noon to 2, and All Things Considered, 4 to 7. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org. We'd love to hear from you. Email us with your story ideas and video submissions. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. Have a great week. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.